she rescued the abandoned Apache infant from the freezing cold. When the father showed up, his deed stunned all. She rescued the abandoned Apache infant from the freezing cold. When the father showed up, his deed stunned all. The gunshot echoed across the frozen canyon before Catherine Walsh even had time to reach for her rifle. She dropped flat against her horse's neck as another bullet whistled past her ear, close enough to feel the heat. Her mare, a sturdy buckskin named Darla, didn't need prompting. The animal bolted toward the cluster of rocks ahead while Catherine scanned the ridgeline for the shooter. This was supposed to be a simple supply run from her ranch to the trading post in Silver Creek. 15 miles of empty winter landscape, nothing but sagebrush and snow. She'd made this ride 100 times in the past 3 years since settling in Montana territory. But today, someone wanted her dead. Catherine reached the rocks and slid from the saddle, Winchester in hand. The temperature had dropped to near zero, and her breath came out in white clouds. She counted to 10, listening. Nothing but wind howling through the canyon. Whoever fired those shots had either moved or was waiting for her to show herself. Then she heard it. A sound so unexpected in this frozen wasteland that she thought the cold had made her imagine things. A baby's cry, thin and desperate, coming from somewhere among the rocks. Catherine's heart hammered. This had to be a trap. Draw her out with the crying, then finish what the shooter started. But the sound came again, weaker this time, and she couldn't ignore it. She'd been raised by a father who taught her that some things mattered more than safety. Moving low between the boulders, she followed the sound to a shallow cave carved into the canyon wall. The crying stopped. Catherine's finger tensed on the trigger as she peered inside. What she found made her stomach drop. A tiny bundle wrapped in deer skin and faded blankets lying on the bare stone. The infant couldn't have been more than a few months old, with dark hair and brown skin already turning blue from the cold. Apache, she realized immediately. The traditional cradle board beside the child confirmed it. Catherine holstered her rifle and scooped up the baby, tucking the small body inside her heavy coat against her chest. The child was ice cold and barely breathing. She had minutes, not hours. Another shot rang out, this time from a different angle. The bullet struck the rock face inches from her head, spraying stone fragments across her cheek. Catherine ran, the baby clutched tight, reaching Darla in seconds. She swung into the saddle one-handed and kicked the mare into a full gallop. The ranch was 8 miles back. Too far. But there was an old line shack about 2 miles east, built by trappers decades ago. If she could reach it, she might be able to get a fire going and save this child. Catherine rode like hell itself was chasing her, bent low over the horse's neck, with one arm wrapped around the baby inside her coat. She could feel the tiny heartbeat, faint and irregular. The child hadn't made a sound since she'd picked it up. Behind her, she heard hoofbeats. At least 2 riders, maybe more, closing the distance. They weren't shooting now, just pursuing. Catherine realized with cold clarity that they wanted her alive, wanted to see where she'd take the baby. The line shack appeared through the blowing snow, a dark shape against the white landscape. Catherine pulled Darla to a sliding stop, jumped down and kicked the door open. The single room was barely 10 feet square, with a stone fireplace and a few pieces of broken furniture. She laid the baby on the floor and worked frantically to start a fire with kindling from the woodpile. Her hands shook from cold and adrenaline. The kindling caught, then the larger pieces, and soon blessed heat began filling the small space. Catherine unwrapped the baby carefully. A girl she saw now, with delicate features and tiny fists clenched tight. The child's lips were blue, her breathing shallow. Catherine stripped off her own shirt and pressed the baby skin to skin against her chest, then wrapped them both in every blanket and hide she could find in the shack. Outside, the hoofbeats stopped. The baby's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, dark eyes that seemed far too ancient for an infant's face. Then they closed again, and Catherine felt the small chest rising and falling more steadily now as warmth returned. The door exploded inward. 3 men filled the entrance, rifles raised. But they didn't fire. They stood there, staring at Catherine and the baby, and the lead man slowly lowered his weapon. He was white, maybe 40 years old, with a marshal's badge pinned to his coat. His face was hard, but his eyes showed something else. Regret, maybe. Or shame. Catherine held the baby closer and met his gaze without flinching. The winter of 1873 had been brutal across Montana territory, but nothing compared to the storm brewing in Silver Creek. Catherine Walsh had lived through 3 winters in this harsh land, carving out a life on her small ranch after her husband died of fever. She'd learned to survive alone, to trust her instincts, and to shoot straight when necessary. But nothing had prepared her for the political firestorm that erupted the moment she rode into town carrying an Apache infant. Marshal Jack Holland stood in her path as she brought Darla to a stop outside Doc Peterson's office. 2 deputies flanked him, hands resting on their gun belts. A crowd had already gathered, drawn by the sight of Catherine riding in with a bundle pressed against her chest. "That baby comes with me," Holland said. His voice was level but firm. Catherine dismounted, keeping the child wrapped inside her coat. The little girl had survived the ride but remained dangerously weak. "She needs a doctor first, then we'll talk." "No talk necessary. There's a bounty on any Apache found in this territory. Governor's orders? That child is property of the territorial government." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. "She's a baby, not property." Holland's jaw tightened. "Law's the law, Mrs. Walsh." "You know what happened at Running Bear Creek? 30 settlers dead, including women and children. Apache raiders showed no mercy. Neither will we." Catherine pushed past him toward the doctor's door. Holland grabbed her arm, and she spun, her free hand dropping to the pistol at her hip. The crowd went silent. For a long moment, nobody moved. Doc Peterson appeared in his doorway, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed spectacles. "For God's sake, Jack, let her bring the child inside. Whatever law you're enforcing can wait until I make sure that baby isn't going to die." Holland released Catherine's arm but followed them inside. The deputies stayed at the door, blocking any exit. Peterson examined the baby on his table while Catherine hovered nearby. The child had warmed up considerably but remained listless, barely responding to stimulus. The doctor worked in silence for several minutes, checking her breathing, her heartbeat, her reflexes. "Exposure and malnutrition," Peterson finally said. "Another hour in that cold and she'd be dead. You saved her life, Catherine." "What happens now?" Catherine asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. Holland spoke from the corner where he'd been watching. "The child goes to Fort Harrison. There's a holding facility for captured Apache. She'll be processed there." "Processed?" Catherine's voice rose. "She's an infant." "What exactly are you going to process?" "That's not your concern. I found her abandoned in a cave. Whoever left her there wanted her to die. I won't let you finish the job." Holland stepped closer, his face hard. "You don't have a choice. This territory is at war with the Apache Nation. Every man, woman, and child is considered hostile. The governor has made that clear. Harboring an Apache, even an infant, is treason." Catherine looked at the tiny girl on the examination table. Someone had dressed her in beautiful traditional clothing before abandoning her. Someone had cared enough to wrap her carefully, to place her in a protected spot. Someone had hoped, perhaps, that she might be found. "Who was shooting at me?" Catherine asked suddenly. "In the canyon, someone fired at least 5 shots. They weren't trying to kill me. They were herding me toward that cave." Holland's expression flickered just for an instant. "Don't know what you're talking about. You're lying. You were there, or your men were. You knew about the baby. You left her there as bait." The room went very quiet. Doc Peterson stopped his work, staring at the marshal. Holland's hand moved to his gun, but he didn't draw. "Careful what you accuse me of, Catherine. Then tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you didn't know there was an Apache infant in that cave. Tell me you didn't use her to draw out anyone who might sympathize with the Apache cause." Holland's silence was answer enough. Catherine felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. "You left a baby to freeze to death. For what? To catch people with a conscience?" "To catch traitors," Holland snapped. "We have reports of settlers helping Apache scouts, providing them with information about army movements. Someone in this area is working with the enemy. That child was our best chance to find out who." "So you used her as bait?"
"You let her suffer and nearly die."
"War requires hard choices." Catherine turned to Peterson. "Can she travel?" The doctor hesitated, glancing between Catherine and the marshal. "Not safely. She needs warmth, food, and rest. At least a few days. Then she stays here," Catherine said. Holland shook his head. "I have my orders, and I'm giving you new ones. That baby doesn't move until the doctor says she's strong enough. If you want to arrest me for treason, go ahead. But you'll have to explain to the whole town why you let an infant die to catch hypothetical traitors." They locked eyes, 2 wills colliding. Catherine knew she was taking an enormous risk. Holland had the law on his side, such as it was in the territories. But she also knew that public opinion still mattered, even in wartime. Most people in Silver Creek were decent folk who wouldn't stand for using a baby as bait. Finally, Holland stepped back. 48 hours. Then she goes to Fort Harrison, and you answer questions about what you were doing in that canyon. He left, his deputies following. Catherine released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Peterson spoke quietly. You just made yourself a target, Catherine. Holland's not the forgiving type. I don't care. Look at her. She's innocent in all this. The doctor nodded slowly. What are you going to do when those 48 hours are up, Catherine? Looked down at the sleeping baby. The child's color had improved, and her breathing was steady. So small, so helpless. Already Catherine felt a fierce protective instinct taking root. I don't know yet, but I'm not letting them take her to that fort. That night, Catherine sat vigil in the doctor's office while Peterson slept in the back room. The baby woke several times, crying weakly. Catherine fed her warmed milk from a cloth soaked in it, the only way the child could manage. Each time the infant's eyes would open, those impossibly dark eyes that seemed to look right through Catherine's soul. Around midnight, someone knocked softly on the door. Catherine's hand went to her pistol, but the door opened before she could respond. A woman slipped inside, wrapped in a heavy cloak. She was young, maybe 25, with blonde hair and green eyes. Catherine recognized her as Linda Morris, who ran the boarding house on Main Street. I heard what happened, Linda said quietly. I wanted to help. Help how? Linda pulled a bundle from beneath her cloak. Baby clothes, blankets, a bottle. She died of fever when she was 6 months old. I kept her things. I thought maybe you could use them. Catherine felt tears prickling her eyes. Thank you, there's more. Linda glanced at the door, making sure they were alone. Holland's planning something. I overheard him talking with his deputies at the boarding house. They're bringing in someone from Fort Harrison tomorrow. A tracker. Apache, actually. They say he can identify tribal affiliations, maybe even specific families. Catherine's blood ran cold. Why? Because they want to know who this baby belongs to. Holland thinks if he can identify her family, he can use her to draw them out. Set another trap. That's insane. Even if her family is alive, they won't come anywhere near Silver Creek. Not with the army hunting them. Linda nodded. I know. But Holland's desperate to catch someone. The territorial governor is demanding results. Every day that goes by without capturing Apache sympathizers makes Holland look incompetent. Catherine looked down at the sleeping baby. The child had no idea she was at the center of a political storm. She just wanted to survive, to be warm and fed and safe. I need to get her out of here, Catherine said. Where would you go? Every settlement in Montana territory has orders to report Apache sightings. You couldn't make it 50 miles before someone turned you in. Then I'll head into the mountains. Live off the land until this blows over. Linda shook her head. It's winter, Catherine. You'd both die up there. And this won't blow over. The war with the Apache is escalating, not ending. Catherine knew she was right, but she couldn't see another option. She couldn't let Holland take this baby to Fort Harrison. Whatever they did to Apache prisoners there, it wouldn't be kind. The night wore on. Linda left before dawn, slipping away as quietly as she'd arrived. Catherine dozed in her chair, the baby sleeping peacefully nearby. For a few hours, the world was still and silent. The sun rose on the second day, and Catherine knew time was running out. By noon, the entire town had heard about the Apache baby. People gathered outside Doc Peterson's office, some curious, some angry, all of them with opinions. Catherine heard them through the walls, debating whether she was a hero or a traitor. Marshal Holland returned with the tracker at 2 p.m. The man was Apache, clearly, but he wore white man's clothes and spoke perfect English. His face was scarred, his eyes hard. Catherine recognized the look of someone who'd seen too much death and made too many compromises to survive. His name's Sam Walker, Holland said. He works for the army now. He'll identify the child. Catherine stood between Walker and the baby. She's sleeping. Leave her alone. Walker studied Catherine with an expression she couldn't read. I'm not here to hurt her. I'm here to help. Help Holland trap her family, you mean? Help everyone understand what we're dealing with? Walker moved closer, and Catherine reluctantly stepped aside. She kept her hand near her gun, ready for anything. Walker looked at the baby for a long time without touching her. He examined her clothing, her cradle board, the patterns woven into the blankets. His face showed nothing. Finally, he straightened. She's from Red Sky's band, Northern Apache. They were camped near the Canadian border last anyone knew. Holland leaned forward eagerly. Are you certain? The beadwork pattern is distinctive. Red Sky's wife, Morning Dove, uses that specific design. No other band does it quite that way. Now Holland had what he needed. He could send word north, set up patrols, try to capture Red Sky's people. But Walker wasn't finished. He turned to Holland, and his voice was cold. Red Sky's band was massacred 3 weeks ago. Army patrol out of Fort Shaw. They found the camp at dawn and killed everyone. Men, women, children. All of them. The room went silent. Holland's face paled. That's not possible. I would have heard about it. You didn't hear about it because the commander buried the report. The band was peaceful. They'd surrendered their weapons weeks earlier. Were living quietly, causing no trouble. The patrol commander decided they were a threat anyway. Catherine felt sick. Then this baby's parents are dead. Most likely. If anyone survived, they scattered into the wilderness. They won't be coming back. Holland looked furious. Then the tracker was wrong. She can't be from Red Sky's band if they were all killed. Walker met his gaze without flinching. She's from that band. Which means someone got her out before the massacre. Someone knew it was coming and saved her. Who? I don't know. Maybe a scout who saw the patrol approaching. Maybe a family member who ran. Does it matter? She's an orphan now. The only survivor of her people. Catherine picked up the baby, holding her close. The child stirred but didn't wake. Then she has no one. Walker's expression softened slightly. She has you, apparently. Holland slammed his fist on the table. This doesn't change anything. The child still goes to Fort Harrison. Orders are orders. Your orders were to use her to catch Apache sympathizers, Walker said, but there's no one left to catch. Her entire band is dead. What's the point of taking her to the fort now? Because the law says all captured Apache go to the holding facilities. She's not captured. She's rescued. There's a difference. Holland and Walker stared at each other, two men on opposite sides of an invisible line. Catherine realized that Walker was trying to help, in his own way. He'd given her information that changed everything. But Holland wasn't backing down. I have my orders, Sam. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm just telling you the facts. What you do with them is your choice. Holland turned to Catherine. Your 48 hours are almost up. Say goodbye to the baby. The third day dawned clear and bitterly cold. Catherine had barely slept, lying awake in the doctor's office with the baby beside her, trying to figure out a plan. By morning, she still had nothing. Doc Peterson brought her coffee and bread at dawn. He sat down heavily, looking older than his years. Jack Holland's bringing a wagon at noon to take the baby to Fort Harrison. Half the town is gathering to watch. Catherine sipped her coffee, thinking, what would happen if I just rode out of here? Took the baby and disappeared? Holland would come after you. He'd have to, or he'd lose all authority. And where would you go? Like Linda said, you can't hide in this territory. What about Canada? It's only about 100 miles north. Peterson shook his head. Through winter mountains with an infant? You'd never make it. And even if you did, the Canadian government has an agreement with ours. They'd send you back. Catherine set down her coffee, frustration building. So I just hand her over? Let them take her to that prison? I'm just trying to make sure you understand what you're up against. The baby woke and started crying. Catherine picked her up, rocking her gently. The child had gained some strength over the past 2 days, but was still weak. She needed more time to recover, more time to grow stronger. Time was the one thing Catherine didn't have. People started gathering outside around mid-morning. Catherine watched through the window as the crowd grew. Some looked sympathetic, but many wore expressions of anger or disgust. To them, this baby represented the enemy, the people who'd killed their neighbors and friends. They didn't see an innocent child. They saw a future warrior, a future threat. At 11:30, a man pushed through the crowd and banged on the door. Catherine recognized him as Frank Dawson, who owned the general store. She opened the door a crack. Mrs. Walsh, you need to hear this. Frank's face was flushed with excitement or fear. She couldn't tell which. Ryder just came in from the north. There's a band of Apache moving this way. About 20 warriors, heavily armed. They're 2 miles outside town and coming fast. Catherine's heart hammered. Red Sky's people? Don't know. But Marshal Holland's getting everyone armed and ready. He thinks they're coming for the baby. Catherine looked back at the infant in her arms. Could it be possible? Had some of Red Sky's band survived after all? Holland burst through the door seconds later, rifle in hand. Get that baby to the fort now. We don't have time to wait. You said noon, Catherine protested. Plans changed. There's a war party heading this way, and I'm not letting them take this town. Get moving. Catherine wrapped the baby securely and followed Holland outside. The crowd had grown larger, and people were running in all directions. Men grabbed weapons from their homes. Women herded children indoors. The peaceful morning had transformed into chaos. A wagon waited in the street, driver ready. Holland gestured toward it. "Put her in there! Deputy Ross will take her to the fort with an armed escort." Catherine hesitated. Something felt wrong about this. Why would Apache warriors attack a fortified town for one baby? It didn't make tactical sense. They'd be slaughtered. "Wait," she said. Holland spun on her. "We don't have time for debate. Something's not right. Think about it." Why would they come here? They'd have to know it's a trap. Maybe they're desperate. Maybe they want the child badly enough to risk it. Or maybe someone's feeding you false information. Holland's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting?" Before Catherine could answer, gunfire erupted from the north end of town. People screamed and scattered. Holland ran toward the sound, shouting orders. His deputies followed, leaving Catherine standing alone with the baby and the wagon. She made a decision in that instant. Catherine ran to where Darla was hitched outside the general store. She swung into the saddle, the baby clutched tight, and kicked the mare into a gallop heading south, away from the fighting. Behind her, the gunfire intensified. Catherine didn't look back. She rode hard, following the river trail that led toward the mountains. If she could reach the high country, she might be able to hide until the situation settled. She'd covered maybe 3 miles when a rider appeared on the trail ahead of her. Catherine pulled Darla to a stop, reaching for her rifle. The rider raised both hands, showing he was unarmed. As he came closer, Catherine recognized Sam Walker, the Apache tracker from yesterday. "Don't shoot," he called. "I'm here to help." "Help how?" Walker reined in his horse beside her. "That attack on the town is a diversion. 3 warriors making noise and firing shots but not trying to actually hurt anyone. They're giving you time to escape." Catherine stared at him. "You set this up. Not me." "But I knew about it. When I examined the baby yesterday, I sent word north to some people I know." "Friends of Red Sky's band? They want the child safe?" "So they attacked the town?" "They created a distraction. There's a difference. By now they'll have disappeared into the hills. Holland and his men will chase ghosts for hours. Meanwhile, you take the baby to safety. Where? You heard what Doc Peterson said. There's nowhere to hide in Montana territory." Walker reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a map. "There's a trading post 3 days' ride from here, run by a French-Canadian named Henri Dubois. He's sympathetic to the Apache cuz he'll help you cross into Canada. Peterson said the Canadian government would send me back. Not if you don't get caught. Henri knows the routes, the places where there's no border patrol. He can guide you." Catherine studied the map, her mind racing. This was real now. She was committing to a path that would make her a fugitive, an outlaw. She could never return to her ranch, never come back to Silver Creek. Everything she'd built over the past 3 years would be gone. She looked down at the baby in her arms. The child's eyes were open, watching her with that ancient, knowing gaze. "Why are you helping me?" Catherine asked Walker. He was quiet for a moment. "Because I've seen too many children die. Apache, white, it doesn't matter. They're all innocent. They all deserve a chance to live." He paused, "And because I knew Morning Dove, the baby's mother. She was kind to me once, when my own people cast me out. I owe her this." Catherine folded the map and tucked it inside her coat. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You have a hard road ahead. The weather's getting worse, and Holland won't give up easily. He'll figure out what happened and come after you." "Let him try." Walker smiled faintly. "Good luck, Catherine Walsh. Take care of that little one." He turned his horse and rode back toward town. Catherine watched him go, then looked down at the baby once more. "Just you and me now," she whispered. "We'll figure this out together." She urged Darla forward, heading into the mountains as the first snow of a new storm began to fall. The journey through the mountains tested Catherine in ways she'd never imagined. The temperature dropped to 20 below zero at night, and the snow fell constantly, covering the trail and making every mile a struggle. Darla proved her worth, sure-footed and steady even in the worst conditions, but Catherine worried constantly about the baby. She'd named her Hope, though she wasn't sure why. Maybe because hope was all they had left. Hope cried less than Catherine expected. The baby seemed to understand in some instinctive way that silence meant survival. Catherine kept her wrapped inside layers of blankets in her own coat, sharing body heat. At night, she built small fires in sheltered spots, feeding Hope warmed milk and praying they'd both see morning. On the second day, Catherine spotted riders behind her. 3 men, pushing hard through the snow, Holland's deputies no doubt tracking her trail. She urged Darla faster, but the mare was already exhausted. They couldn't outrun pursuit for long. Catherine found a narrow canyon that branched off the main trail. She guided Darla into it, then spent an hour carefully covering their tracks with pine branches and snow. It was a desperate gambit, but it might work if the deputies were in a hurry. She led Darla deep into the canyon until they reached a dead end. A small cave, barely large enough for a horse and rider, provided shelter. Catherine dismounted and waited, every sense straining. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped near the canyon entrance. Catherine held her breath, one hand on her rifle, the other supporting hope against her chest. Voices carried through the cold air. Trail goes cold here. Damn snow's covering everything. She can't have gone far. Not with a baby. Boss wants her brought back alive. He's offering $100 reward.
$100. That was serious money in Montana territory.
Every tracker and bounty hunter for 200 miles would be hunting her now. The hoofbeats resumed, moving away. Catherine waited another hour before risking movement. When she finally emerged from the cave, the canyon was empty. She rode through the night, pushing Darla as hard as she dared. By dawn of the third day, she'd crossed into the high country near the Canadian border. The trading post Sam Walker had marked on her map should be close, maybe 5 miles ahead, but hope was fading. The baby's breathing had become labored, her skin hot to the touch despite the cold. Fever, Catherine realized with growing panic. Exposure and stress were taking their toll on the infant's fragile system. Catherine pushed Darla faster, heedless of the danger. If hope died now, after everything they'd endured, Catherine didn't think she could bear it. The trading post appeared through the snow like a mirage. A cluster of log buildings around a central courtyard, smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Catherine rode straight in, shouting for help. A big man with a black beard emerged from the largest building, rifle in hand. He took one look at Catherine and the bundle in her arms and lowered his weapon. "Henri Dubois?" Catherine gasped. "Oui. You must be the woman Sam told me about. Come inside, quickly." Henri's wife, a Cree woman named Marie, took Hope from Catherine's arms and disappeared into a back room. Catherine stood in the warm trading post, swaying with exhaustion, while Henri poured her hot tea laced with whiskey. "The baby is very sick," Marie said, returning 20 minutes later, "but I think she will live. She needs rest and warmth and good food. You both do." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't cried since finding Hope in that frozen cave, but now all the fear and stress of the past days came pouring out. Marie held her while she sobbed. "You are safe here. Rest now, we will talk later." Catherine slept for 14 hours straight, the deepest sleep of her life. When she woke, it was dark outside and Hope was sleeping peacefully in a cradle beside her bed. The baby's fever had broken. Henri and Marie fed her a huge meal of venison stew and fresh bread. Catherine ate like she'd been starving, which she realized she nearly had been. "Holland's men are searching everywhere," Henri said. "Word came through yesterday. They know you're heading for Canada. There are patrols on all the main routes. Can you still get us across? But not yet. We must wait for the storm to pass. Another big one is coming, maybe the worst of the winter. In 3 or 4 days, when everyone else is seeking shelter, we slip across. There is a valley, I know, a place where no patrols go. Very difficult to reach, but possible." Catherine nodded. "What then?" "Then you start a new life. There are communities in Canada, people who will help. It will not be easy, but you can disappear. Become someone else." "And Hope?" Marie spoke up. "She will be your daughter. No one will question it if you raise her as white. Many children have dark hair and eyes. In a few years, no one will remember she is Apache. Could it work? Could she really raise Hope as her own, hiding the girl's true heritage?" It felt wrong somehow, like erasing part of who Hope was. But what was the alternative? Tell everyone Hope was Apache and risk her being taken away? Risk both of them being hunted forever? "I'll do whatever keeps her safe," Catherine said quietly. The storm Henry predicted hit the next day with savage fury. Wind held around the trading post, and snow fell so thick Catherine couldn't see 10 feet. She spent the time recovering her strength, helping Marie with chores, and caring for Hope. The baby was improving rapidly. She was eating better, crying more vigorously, showing signs of the healthy infant she should be. Catherine marveled at her resilience. Hope had endured more in her first months of life than most people faced in years. On the fourth day, a rider appeared through the storm. Catherine watched from the window, hand on her pistol, as Henri went out to meet him. The rider was Sam Walker. He looked exhausted and half frozen. Henri brought him inside quickly, and Marie wrapped him in blankets by the fire. "Holland knows you're here," Walker said without preamble. "He's gathering men from 3 different settlements, planning to raid the trading post tomorrow, storm or no storm." Catherine felt ice in her veins. "How did he find us?" "Someone talked. There's always someone who talks for the right price." "Henri, they know you've been helping Apache refugees cross the border. They're coming for you, too." Henri cursed in French. "How many men? 15? Maybe 20? Too many to fight." "Then we run," Catherine said. "All of us. Right now? In this storm?" Marie looked worried. "It's suicide." "So is staying here waiting for Holland." Henri stood, decision made. "Catherine is right. We pack what we can carry, burn the rest. If Holland wants this place, he'll find ashes." They worked quickly, gathering supplies, saddling horses. Catherine bundled Hope carefully, making sure the baby was protected from the elements. Sam Walker insisted on coming with them, saying he'd crossed the line too many times to go back now. By nightfall, they were ready. Henri and Marie stood in their trading post one last time, looking at everything they'd built over 20 years. "It is just a place," Marie said softly. "We can build again." Henri lit the torch. They rode out as flames consumed the buildings behind them. The storm provided cover, making them invisible to anyone more than a few yards away. Henri led them northwest, following paths only he knew, avoiding roads and settlements. It was the longest night of Catherine's life. The cold was brutal, the wind threatening to tear them from their saddles. Hope cried constantly, and Catherine feared the baby wouldn't survive this final trial. But as dawn broke on the 5th day, they crested a ridge and looked down into a wide valley. Canada. They'd made it across the border. Sam Walker pulled his horse alongside Catherine's. "There's a settlement about 10 miles west. French-speaking, mostly trappers and farmers. They don't ask too many questions about where people come from. Will you come with us?" Walker shook his head. "My path leads elsewhere, but I'll make sure word spreads that you died in the storm, that you and the baby never made it. Give you a chance to disappear completely." Catherine reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for everything." Walker smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "Take care of Hope. Teach her about her people someday when it's safe. Don't let her forget who she is." "I won't. I promise." Walker rode away, heading back toward Montana territory. Catherine watched until he disappeared into the distance, then turned to Henri and Marie. "Let's go home," she said. The settlement Henri had mentioned was called Lac du Cerf, a small community of about 50 families scattered around a frozen lake. They arrived in early afternoon, exhausted and half frozen but alive. The settlement leader, a gruff but kind man named Jacques Moreau, listened to their story. Henri vouched for Catherine, and that seemed to be enough. By evening, they were settled in a small cabin on the edge of town, with promises of work and help getting established. Catherine sat by the fire that night, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought about everything she'd lost, her ranch, her old life, her identity as Catherine Walsh. That person was gone now, left behind in Montana territory. But she'd gained something too. This tiny baby who'd somehow survived impossible odds. This child who'd brought out a courage Catherine didn't know she'd possessed. "We made it," she whispered to Hope. "We're safe now." Hope's eyes opened, those deep, dark eyes that had seen too much. The baby reached up one tiny hand and grabbed Catherine's finger. In that moment, Catherine understood. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning. 6 months passed in Lac du Cerf. Catherine settled into her new life, working as a seamstress and helping Marie run a small trading shop. Hope grew strong and healthy, starting to crawl and babble. The townspeople accepted them without question, and slowly Catherine began to feel safe. She'd heard nothing from Montana territory. As far as anyone there knew, Catherine Walsh and the Apache baby had died in the winter storm. Sam Walker had done his job well. Then, on a bright spring morning, a stranger rode into town. He was Apache, that much was immediately clear. He wore a mix of traditional and white clothing, and he carried himself with the bearing of a warrior. People stared as he rode past, heading directly toward Catherine's cabin. Catherine saw him coming and felt her blood run cold. She grabbed Hope and backed toward the door, ready to run. The man dismounted and raised both hands, showing he meant no harm. "Catherine Walsh?" he asked in heavily accented English. "Who's asking?" "My name is Red Sky. That child you hold is my daughter." The world seemed to tilt. Catherine tightened her grip on Hope, who squirmed and reached toward the stranger. "Red Sky is dead. His whole band was massacred. I survived. So did my wife, Morning Dove, though she died of her wounds 2 weeks later. Before she passed, she told me what she'd done, how she gave our daughter to a white woman she'd never met, trusting that woman would save her." Catherine's mind raced. "How did Morning Dove know about me?" "She didn't. She was dying from bullet wounds, crawling through the snow with our baby. She saw your ranch house in the distance and knew she couldn't reach it, so she hid our daughter in that cave, wrapped her in our family's blankets, and prayed someone would find her before the cold took her." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened to your people." Red Sky's face was unreadable. "I did not come for apologies. I came to see my daughter, to see that she lives and is well." He stepped closer, and Catherine forced herself not to back away. Red Sky looked at Hope with such love and longing that Catherine's heart broke. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "She has her mother's eyes." Hope reached out toward him, making happy babbling sounds. Red Sky's composure cracked, and tears ran down his weathered face. "I want to hold her," he said. "Please. Just once." Catherine hesitated, then slowly handed Hope to her father. Red Sky cradled the baby like she was made of glass, speaking to her in Apache, his voice thick with emotion. They stood there for a long time, father and daughter, while Catherine watched. Finally, Red Sky kissed Hope's forehead and handed her back. "Thank you," he said, "for saving her, for caring for her, for giving up everything to keep her safe." "What happens now?" Catherine asked, afraid of the answer. Would he take Hope away? Did he have a right to, even though Catherine had raised her for the past months? Red Sky was quiet for a moment. "I have been thinking about this since I learned she was alive. I have been asking myself what Morning Dove would want. What is best for our daughter. And the world is changing. The Apache way of life is ending. My people are being hunted, killed, forced onto reservations. I want my daughter to live, to grow up free and safe. I cannot give her that." He paused, his voice breaking. "But you can. You want me to keep her? I want you to raise her as your own. Give her the life she deserves. But," he looked directly into Catherine's eyes, "I want you to tell her about us. About her mother and father, about her people. Do not let her forget who she is, I promise. I'll tell her everything. When she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her about your courage, about Morning Dove's sacrifice. I'll make sure she knows her heritage." Red Sky nodded slowly. "Then I ask one more thing. I have something that belonged to Morning Dove. I want Hope to have it, to keep always." He pulled a necklace from his shirt. It was beautiful, made of silver and turquoise, with intricate beadwork. He placed it carefully in Catherine's hand. "This was my wedding gift to Morning Dove. She wore it every day. Now it belongs to our daughter." Catherine held the necklace carefully. "I'll keep it safe until she's old enough." Red Sky touched Hope's cheek one last time, then stepped back. "I should go. It is not safe for me to stay. The Canadian authorities are not as hostile as the Americans, but they still report Apache sightings. Will you come back? Will you visit her? If I can. But do not wait for me. Live your life. Raise our daughter. Be happy." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. Her name. You have been calling her Hope?" "Yes. Because she gave me hope when I needed it most." Red Sky smiled faintly. Morning Dove called her Bright Star. It is a good name, but Hope is also good. 2 names for 2 worlds. Maybe she can carry both. He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. Catherine stood holding Hope, watching until he disappeared into the forest. Hope, who was also Bright Star, squirmed in her arms and babbled something that sounded almost like words. Catherine kissed her forehead. "Your father loves you," she whispered. "Never forget that. And your mother died protecting you. That's who you come from. That's the strength you carry." The baby grabbed Catherine's face with both tiny hands and grinned. Catherine walked back into the cabin, closing the door on the past and opening it to the future. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Mother and daughter, not by blood, but by choice. Two survivors who'd found each other in the frozen wilderness and refused to give up. The story that started with a baby abandoned in a cave had become something much bigger. A story about courage, sacrifice, and the bonds that transcend race and history. A story about a father who loved his daughter enough to let her go, and a woman who loved her enough to risk everything. As Hope grew older, Catherine would tell her all of it, every detail. And when Hope was a woman herself, she would tell the story to her own children, keeping alive the memory of Morning Dove and Red Sky, the Apache couple who chose life over death, hope over despair. But that was years in the future. For now, Catherine had a baby to feed, a life to build, and a promise to keep. She looked down at Hope, who'd fallen asleep in her arms, perfectly content. "We're home," Catherine said softly. "We're finally home." Outside, spring was coming to Lac de Surf. The ice on the lake was breaking up and green shoots were pushing through the snow. After the longest winter anyone could remember, the world was coming back to life. And in a small cabin on the edge of a settlement where no one asked too many questions, two people who'd found each other against all odds were building a future. One day at a time. Together.